Thanks for tuning in and welcome to Marketing Bites, Restaurant Growth Unwrapped. I'm your host, Brian Siemienas, the Vice President of Restaurant Solutions for Nift. Today, I welcome our guest, Kim Jensen-Pitts, founder and CEO of KJP Marketing Services. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Kim, I'm looking forward to our conversation today. So first off, you have an extensive career background in marketing, starting off with McDonald's before shifting to the retail side with Edison's Brothers store. And then you came back to the restaurant industry with Cracker Barrel, Atlanta Bread Company, Rare Hospitality, and Ted's Montana Grill. How have these experiences helped get you to where you are today?
Well, essentially now, Brian, I've been in the restaurant business almost 30 years. I don't know if that means I'm a glutton for punishment or what. But yeah, I actually started out working for a McDonald's franchisee in Bloomington, Normal, Illinois. They had 5 McDonald's, and I was working as a cashier while I was going through college. And the franchisee was looking for someone to help with local store marketing. And so that's where I started. I started out doing, things like senior bingo and kids programs. So working in the trenches. And after I graduated college, I went to go work for a retail company that at the time had like 10 different specialty brands. And I worked in training and development, and then kind of segued back over to Cracker Barrel and have been in the restaurant side ever since.
Yeah. So to your point of glutton for punishment, I think all of us, have to be a little bit of insanity, as we keep jumping back in, and I was similar. I shifted to the hotel side with Hilton and, missed that glutton for punishment. So jumped back in, with Darden.
Yeah. I have to say, the restaurant business is never dull, right? So always something new, always new concepts coming up, and it's a challenge, but I do enjoy it. Sadly, but I do.
Yeah. It's certainly one of those, it helps stress tests and stuff. We keep our cardiologists really on, speed dial in the industry.
Yeah, true. Who would have ever thought something like COVID would happen? Obviously now there's a lot of uncertainty in the economy. So, it's always a roller coaster.
For sure. So,
and when sales are good, it's operations, and when sales are not so great, it's marketing.
Of course, yeah, of course. That's why as we were joking before we started recording, the lifespan of a CMO or VP of marketing is about 1 year and 6 months, and seems to be dropping, especially with current traffic and some of the challenges.
Yeah, that's actually why, sometimes it's hard to explain to people what I do, but, I was always sort of the corporate, ladder climber kind of person. I want this job, this title, this salary, and, had worked my way up from marketing coordinator to VP of marketing. And then in 2008, I was working for Rare Hospitality, which had Longhorn Steakhouse, Capitol Grill, and Bugaboo Creek Steakhouse. And the company was sold. And, 2008 was not a great economy. And I live in Atlanta and wanted to stay here. And so I really started having people approach me. I had a lot of connections in the industry, and people said, hey, we could use some help with our marketing, but we can't afford to hire you full time. And so I thought, well, I'll just, kind of do some contracting and consulting work for now. And then I kept doing more, and I started working with more emerging brands and people who wanted to franchise and people who needed some strategic help. And the next thing you know, I was like, I think I could make a living at this. And there's been a lot of people who have tried. I've talked to many people over the years who are like, oh, I would love to do what you do. Well, it's not as easy as it sounds, because, you have to have the cardiologist at ready, because, things can change. But ironically, with the average tenure being 18 months for a CMO, I've had more longevity with most of the people I work with than if I was full time.
Yeah. So as you say, in about 2015 was when you formed KJP Marketing Services to do that, fractional
Yeah, I sort
type
of
of
formally
opportunity.
I dabbled for a while, and then I sort of formally, I said, well, I guess I am in business, and so I formed my own LLC, and I usually work with three, four, five restaurant chains at a time. My sweet spot is kind of that 5 to 50. Less than five, they really can't afford to work with me, and then above that, they usually hire someone full time.
Okay, and as you talk about that sweet spot, that 5 to 50, and
Yeah.
it's funny because nowadays there's some five that are, I'm finding on our side, more sophisticated than the 200, or and then
Yes.
there's some of the, like I said, it's just all over the place, with the number of locations. But as you look at it, so let's say you're working with the 3 to 5 different brands,
Yeah.
certainly maybe different, casual, QSR,
Mhm.
fast casual, as well as different, demographics, food types. How do you approach the marketing as you're looking at each of the brands you're working with?
Well, honestly, I mean, of course I feel this way, but I think working with someone like me is a huge advantage because I am seeing I'm working with people at different levels, right, in their history as well. So some people who are really growing at a fast rate, some who are local, some who have more advertising budgets than others. So the reality is that over the years, I have learned a lot from different people. So, there might be a solution that would work for one that's not for the other, but I have a really good network of vendors that I work with. And so I can usually tell, okay, this will work well for this company, this won't, etc. And because honestly, I have to stay so fresh on what's happening in the industry that it's a huge advantage, I think, to the people I work with. I know who's good and I know who's not.
Yeah, so important. As I always say, it's and it's getting tougher. And later on, we'll get into, you and I have been in the industry, similar periods and that
Yeah,
evolution. But likewise, working, there's pros you talked about. There's also cons. You've
sure.
probably got different CEOs, different exec teams looking at things differently, maybe even different
Hmm.
KPIs. Even though they're maybe wrong, you're not in a position to change it. So as you're looking at the different marketing you're doing, how are you looking at what's working, what's delivering from your perspective, and then as well changing that positioning to what the ultimate
Sure.
client is wanting?
Well, at the end of the day, I think it's all about building the brand and obviously driving sales. And so to me, I used to have very sophisticated, in some cases, data analysis teams, lots of technology, and that you can get into analysis paralysis too. And I can, everybody keeps saying, oh, I need more data. I need more data. Well, it's more important, like, okay, well, who's going to analyze it and what are you going to do with it? So I think it's a balance. I think it's a little bit of gut, a little bit of data, and obviously, sales are king. So if you're driving sales, you must be doing something right.
Absolutely. So both of us, a couple back in April. What are we sitting here in May? It seems like it was
Yeah.
much longer. We both
Yeah.
attended the Restaurant Leadership Conference,
Yep.
and you were one of the panelists. Had a great session. You were representing your client, Cowboy Chicken, along with
Cowboy chicken. Yeah.
Jeff Alexander from Wow Bao. Talking about the topic was gamifying loyalty and strategies for engagement success. Was a great session. Can you share for the listeners, some of the your thoughts on that session and what you guys shared?
Yeah, it was a little interesting, I will be honest, because they asked me, about being on the session, which I could talk about loyalty and loyalty programs all day long, but they wanted to talk a little bit about gamification. And, Jeff from Wow Bao was talking a lot about gamification with, what is it called? Robotex,
Yeah.
robots, roba,
Yeah.
something. Anyway, so I'm obviously aging myself. And, you know, I'm a little anti bells and whistles sometimes, like gamification. I mean, I don't know if I am on board with as much of some of those things as I am about good old fashioned, like giving people value, and they will come more often. So, but I think it was a good balance. Like, he was a little more into the gamification, um, which didn't honestly have a whole lot of measurement. They were doing it more for like publicity and PR, and they got a lot of great buzz from it. And I think that's great. But, I have smaller budgets with a lot of the people I work with. And so, we're more focused on, really, is loyalty driving sales overall? Are we getting people to come more frequently? Are we giving more value to those people so they continue to come back? So I think it was a nice balance on the panel, kind of talking about those things.
Yeah, to your point, and it's sort of, sometimes we in the industry and as executives will oversimplify things. And I always get concerned when you send team members to these conferences. And, to your point, the gamification. Wild Bao is a very, right now, sexy brand. He operates it. They're sort of a little bit unique because they, for the most part, are a franchisor. They franchise, but they're a supplier. So he doesn't even get in the traditional of, okay, let's get the franchisees to a degree. Here's what the discount is. So he almost to a degree has no choice. And with a hot brand, you can do that. And there's some out there. I mean, when you start getting brands that are maybe demo, not, the younger generation that cares as much, I think it becomes a little bit more challenging. And then there's also that little bit of luck in any of it where it goes social, it gets picked up, and there's great examples we've seen, and even old brands. I mean, I was just at
for sure.
Just at Meg, and the main speaker, which has been, it seems like, on the circuit is Chili, Chili CMO. And I mean, let's be honest, there's no brand. That brand's, almost older than you and I, and now is the hottest brand with the cheese pull. And, so it's not that just the young, sexy brands that are new. It can happen to the older ones. But, you're dead on. I thought you guys had a great balance of, if you can make it work for you and you've got the budget to, build out some of that. And, thankfully the costs are coming lower, but, you're dead on when you're working with 20, 30 restaurants and don't have, 8-figure, 9-figure budgets. It gets a lot tougher to really do those bells and whistles.
Yeah, but I think, I sort of have it, I don't want to say down pat because Lord knows things can change overnight, but, I really look at, okay, what are still some big new ideas to keep things fresh, and always kind of keeping my eye on those things, but then also being realistic about, well, this is what the budget can afford. And, I'm mentoring someone right now at Cowboy Chicken, and and she's younger than me. And I think it's difficult because I don't want to, squash her enthusiasm and look at new ideas. But then I also want to explain the practicalities. Okay, this is how many units we have. This is how much sales we have. Our budget is a % of sales, and that's the ad fund. And so I have to balance between what do we use the ad fund for, as far as like creative services, production, G&A, et cetera. And then what do we use for media, and trying to figure out what's really going to work to drive sales. And so, it's a good balance because she can have some creative new ideas, and then I sort of like bring it down to earth and be like, okay, well, how can we really accomplish that?
Yeah, you're dead on. And especially when you've got ultimately those funds that are accountable. And, I think the big thing as I looked at it is, okay, you break the budget out, and there's I early on in my Hard Rock days had a great CMO, and he said, okay, literally there's 5 areas: working media, which should be the largest. You then have your production. You then have your, what we at that point, research, because we did do consumer research, just to measure different things. And then PR as well, because it was at Hard Rock. PR was a big part of our budget, and everything got broken down into there. And, to your point, what was critical is, okay, what's going to ultimately drive the butts in the seats, but then setting that budget of what are the things we're going to try. And there's so many things out there, but at the end of the day, you can't put 60% of your budget at something. And, as well, we both know the number of emails, the number of people that are constantly reaching out, as I say, selling me rainbows and unicorns. of how they can solve my problems, but the problem is it's not at smaller budgets, it's at budgets
Yeah.
that are like, okay, that's 30-40% of a budget, and you really, is this going to deliver? But you're right,
Well,
it's
I like to, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I like to equate it to, good, better, and best,
yeah,
right? So like, and is the juice worth the squeeze? Those are like two things I think I say on the daily. So I'm always like, okay, well, yes, we could have this amazing texting program, hire this company to do SMS, have some AI driven one-to-one marketing, but at the end of the day, it costs X, and our demographic is still a little older. And how many people are going to use it versus how much money we have to spend on it? So I'm like, but we could have this program that's good, and we could still send out SMS. Maybe it doesn't have as many bells and whistles, but it works well for where we're at in our evolution. So always trying to figure out, like, okay, is this good and good enough perhaps to make our goals? Or do we look at this brand new, shiny, expensive thing that, we're unsure about at this point?
yeah. Kim, I absolutely love that you used my phrase that in my teams would. I didn't have a swear jar, although getting back in the restaurant
I
space,
mean, I need one
certainly
of those.
right. But I would say all the time and ask them, is the juice worth the squeeze? Because again,
Right.
the most and even been on the vendor side now, remind, and I know the most valuable commodity of you or any marketer, and really it's getting anyone in the restaurant space, as costs go up and the frontline employee costs go up,
Yes.
and the product, food costs, real estate, every P&L line, where the cutbacks are having to come is in those support services, because there's nowhere
Yep.
else. And to your point, you're not going to cut back your work in media for marketing. So,
Mm-hmm.
everyone's most valuable commodity is your time. So I would always say, okay, yeah, it sounds great, but even if it delivers the best, is the juice worth the squeeze?
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that, I sort of miss early in my career. There were a lot more opportunities to, what I would say back then, is take a single and turn it into a triple or a home run,
Yeah, sure.
and be able to work on it. Whereas just now, I mean, teams that were probably 25% of the size, with the same brands, with more on their plate. Because back when we
Mm-hmm.
started in the early 2000s, yes, we had our same challenges, but it wasn't. I joked, from a crisis communication standpoint, the first thing when a restaurant, did anyone have a video camera? And as long as they didn't, it's like, okay,
Yeah.
there was no social. It didn't matter if you went and typed, what you were going to tell 5 friends, because the big thing was there video of it, because maybe they'd get a news person to do it.
Yeah.
Whereas nowadays, it's like, okay, how bad is it? And in a matter of, if it's overnight, depending on your operating hours, back then we would have maybe a day or half a day, depending on the time. Whereas now, I keep thinking back to the United Airlines when they assaulted that,
Mm-hmm.
dragged them off the plane. Literally, everyone went to bed. The frontline employee, by the time they woke up, they lost a couple billion in market value. And it was like, what the heck happened?
Yeah, it's very fast. I always say, thank God there wasn't a camera when I was in college.
Oh, yes, yes. And although we all, on our kids, tell them that, what are you doing? To your point, we just were a lot luckier because they just couldn't
We
document
were a
it
lot
and
luckier,
post it.
yeah.
So getting back onto, loyalty,
Sure.
it's one of the interesting, because a lot of hot buttons in the industry, but right now from a marketing, it's customer acquisition is a challenge as the pie isn't increasing, as well as a lot of people are heavying up on loyalty to try to get that frequency. You represent, as you said, different size brands. What do you feel are the essentials in a loyalty program, whether it's a 10 location brand or a 100 plus location brand?
It's interesting because I think I've also sort of settled on the fact that the simpler, the better, so that people really understand. I mean, I have had very complex loyalty programs. For example, I worked for Taco Mac and they have 30 locations in Atlanta. It's very complicated. You get points basically for every unique beer you drink, so that, you have 50 beers on tap at different stores, and it becomes very complicated, right? There's, you join and you're a pledge, and then you work your way up to a chancellor, kind of a university type theme. And all of that is great, but it's a lot to manage. And so I think at the end of the day, you have to look at what is important to your guest. And so I think, I've done rewards over the years, experiences over the years. I'm like, oh, this is so great at Cowboy Chicken. We'll give the highest level, the cattle baron is what the status level is, a turkey for Christmas. And at the end of the day, I'm like, oh, this is so great, but nobody wanted a turkey. So, you make mistakes or whatever, and you fail fast is what I say. I'd rather fail fast and try something else. But all these things you think are going to add value and you think that are so cool, maybe people really don't care about. And so at the end of the day, I think, looking at what matters to people the most. And really give them more of that. And I think do less better is another thing I say a lot. Let's really focus on the things that are going to move the needle and that are going to matter. One thing I will say too is that people need to think about loyalty as not just being an app. I mean, I think years ago, everybody's like, oh, we got to have an app. Oh, that's loyalty. But the reality is, lots of people are never going to download an app. People don't want stuff on their phone. An app is not the cool, shiny thing anymore. So you really have to think about how are you going to affect loyalty across my platforms and then get people to use it and have value in it. Otherwise, who cares about an app?
Yeah, Kim, and it's funny. I'm going to be a broken record on a couple other episodes and even at, the Meg conference. And you and I may have overlapped. I know you were at Rare. I was fortunate at Darden and worked under Gene Lee and Dave George.
Yes, me too. He's a great guy.
Who were brilliant. And, they really taught me, and throughout our careers, it's a learning, is frictionless. Okay, make everything simple. Make it easy, whether it was operations, whether it, and to your point, my biggest pet peeve in the industry is we make things so complicated. And when you ask, people, well, would you do that? No. Well, then why are we trying to force a guest? And, your example of an app. Okay. Yes. If you're a big brand, I've got on my phone the Starbucks app because I don't like waiting in line. I order.
You might only use a couple. On your phone.
And that's the point is, as a brand, we've got to take off. And whether it was Margaritaville, the pear colored glasses, or Olive Garden, the green color, Longhorn, the brown or red, are people really going to download your app? And yes, if you're a McDonald's, all the kids are doing it because they give great, that's their discount platform for the younger generation. But, my favorite is, we force people to do things, whether it's download the app, or my favorite is I want to online order first party direct with you, which we should be begging people to do. And you force me to create an account. And literally it's not a simple, if you don't have that guest button in, yes, I get it. And, recently we saw Portillo's, huge Chicago Portillo's fan.
I love Portillo's.
And they got sort of, their loyalty program, no app, that, you can do it, but it's, the phone number. And it's like, well, you can't do it. Yes, we all understand if I have the app and can track you, I can get more information. But if that's costing you 70, 80% of the people from enrolling, is that extra info worth it? And, to your point, I think it's a matter of what your brand is and being realistic. Are they going to download this app versus giving a phone number and some basic, demo information and growing it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's kind of interesting because, the restaurant industry for many years, and probably still in some cases, has been notoriously behind. I think, even back when I was in the retail business, we were just so much better about understanding customer data, sales information, all of that. And, restaurant was always so fragmented, different POS systems versus, lack of integration and all of those things. And so, I was actually talking to someone the other day about we have worked so hard to get everything integrated, and I don't know how much further ahead we are than we were before. Yes, now the restaurants may not have to use a tablet, and yes, we may not have 5 tablets sitting on the counter, But at the end of the day, we worked so hard, spent so much money, done all this integration, and where are we? And kind of the having the bandwidth, whether it's from a financial or a personnel perspective, to actually look at the data and make decisions on it and to be able to move forward. Again, we've done all this work, but is it really worth it? Are we able to really make changes based on it?
Yeah, and that was one of the topics as well at Meg, and has been at all of them, is the technology. There's so much out there. There's so many great things, but there's been a lot of stories. Are they truly integrated? Everyone will tell you, oh yeah,
Right.
We're integrated, but then you find out that the wires don't fully connect, and you're in a pickle. As we talked earlier, your team, that's whether you're fractional or full time, you may have a team of 2, 3 at most. There's a ton of data coming in. Who's analyzing that? And we both hear at these conferences AI, which gets us into the next topic. Okay, AI is incredible. I was at RLC. I don't know if you did one of the self-driving Google cars. That certainly was AI driven.
Oh, yes. It's very cool.
And so there's incredible things, but I sort of laugh at these where the response is, oh, well, AI will do that. And I remember last year at NRA, someone raised their hand and said, okay, that's great. And it happened to be, it was incredible, the technology. They were able to go through your social and look at every photo and figure out what was on the table to understand what LTOs tended to be or what items tended to be. And the person's like, okay, it's me, and I got a team of 2 that handle my social, my digital, my customer service, plus all the other restaurant stuff. Who's analyzing all this data? And while AI is great, I don't think we've gotten to that point of, it's a tool right now, but how are you going to do that if you've got a small team with all this information coming in? And I don't know if you've seen anything that, says, hey, next week, next month, we're going to be there.
Yeah, no, I think same. I think, as an example, everybody wants to know about menu information. Like, what is driving repeat customers? Are there some menu items that cause people to come to you? For example, like, I keep hearing about the Dave's hot chicken and the cauliflower, sandwich, and, oh, that's bringing in, new people who haven't been to a Dave's before. I hear all that. But then, I at the end of the day, I still am like the purist on the sales. At the end of the day, are we selling the item? Are people coming back because they like our brand, they like our food in general, not because we have a cauliflower sandwich? And so I deal with the menu question a lot, right? Like, what's going to drive sales? What LTOs are working? And I'm like, okay, well, are we selling it? How does it compare to the rest of the menu? What's the cost of goods? What's the labor on that item? Are we, having this great cauliflower sandwich, but it's taking like someone in the back of house, 10 minutes to prep? I think you have to balance all those things, the whole star dog matrix from years ago. And there's a little bit of gut and a little bit of science and a little bit of past experience. And so I always say I jumble all those things up in my brain and I say, here's my recommendation, versus like being so paralyzed by every single little point of data. And I've tried like different companies that say they can do it. Oh, we'll do this, Marketing Vitals, Olo Engage, at the end of the day, I'm like, I don't think this has told us shit. So I don't know. I think it's a little bit of all those other things that you kind of mash up and just do the best you can and fail fast.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot where in one of the sessions at Meg, the person almost created a situation where almost like the CEO is an AI advising you on decisions, which, I'm with you. I think there's experience, there's gut, because some of the best decisions I've seen made over my career by other, executives or mentors were the data showed them something different, but based on, they were able to see through things and say, well, I think this, let's give it a try and see what happens. Whereas, I think there's still the point of human creativity and out of the box thinking, which I, at the end of the day, like to think, well, AI is going to be incredible, and
Incredible.
I get excited on CRM side. And you and I
Hmm.
love, you may be a vegetarian, I may not, and we're still to the
I am
point,
not, but
you
yeah.
know, okay, maybe you like burgers better than me. I go get
Right.
this menu item. Well, today we're still getting the same damn email. Whereas could AI literally go through and customize and do all these different things that, even the best right now are having challenges with,
Yeah.
when you get
And
into
it's
that CRM
challenging.
side.
It's challenging, Brian, because like I love when people say that example. Okay.
Mhm.
But here's how I look at it, which could be wrong, but this is just my opinion. Let's say that I have a new, really spectacular, we're promoting now, I don't know, at Cowboy Chicken, we're doing boneless wings.
Yeah.
And let's say I want to promote boneless wings and you're a vegetarian. Okay. I get that. But when people are only opening 10 or 20% of your emails and you want to get your message out to the most people you can, I worry a little bit about being too one to one because I want everyone to know we have boneless wings.
Mhm.
Come or not, I'm trying to speak to the most people. And I don't know, if I'm a vegetarian, I'm not necessarily insulted that you sent me an email about boneless
Yeah.
wings. I might say, hey, my son is all about those boneless wings and let's go. So I worry a little bit about being too narrow in your focus because
Mhm.
then you're just simply reaching less people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree with you. And at Margaritaville, we changed up the way we did email is and again, frequency, there's some is, I agree. There's what I would call those tentpole events, whether it's the new, the wing LTO, whatever it is. But then there's
Mhm.
that you can't send those same emails week after week,
Yes, I
and
agree.
I view it as that supplemental. So if every other week you're sending whatever the tentpole messaging is or the primary
Right.
messaging, I view it as that off week of, and there's some brands literally, I'll get the same emails and I get people don't read it, but for those that do, you eventually
It's
start tuning out
wear out.
and,
Yeah.
wear out. And that's where I get excited is, okay, you know what? I'm with you. If you send it twice a month, it's not going to, depending on the period, not going to bother me as
Yeah.
much. But if every message is the same, because we know, I mean, to do that, it takes time, it takes effort. Whereas if AI could literally come up with a messaging and you're just approving based on it, that's where I
Yeah.
think as marketers, it's going to be, tremendous because of just all that data that's so overwhelming.
Well, I use AI every day and in some form or fashion. And I think it's just a balance of not necessarily letting AI run it, but also using your experience to balance that. But there are instances like we're using AI in loyalty really when people are like dropping off, or AI can tell you, okay, Brian goes 4 times a month. What happened? He's missed now for 2 months. It'll send something to spur you. Or, hey, Kim likes this, and so I'm going to send her this. Like the journey campaigns is where I see a lot of value, reminders of people who have rewards and don't use them. I have so many people who have earned rewards and they forget that they've earned them, or don't understand that they earned it, or don't know how to look at their wallet on the app, which is the thing that you really sort of need if you're going to track your rewards, unless you want to do it on your computer. So I do think AI can help with that. I've had AI help me with research, and I fed it spreadsheets and asked to kind of summarize the results, etc. All of that's great, but I had someone the other day look at an analysis on our order modes, like, hey, how much is going to curbside, how much is to go pick up in store, etc. And the spreadsheet is a little complex, and she fed it into AI, and it posted these results that didn't really even make any sense. Like, you have got to interpret the information it's sending you and realize, well, wait a minute, that doesn't add up, that doesn't compute, that's not correct, because otherwise we're sending the wrong information to the executives and making decisions on it. So you have to have some skill to be able to work with AI too. It's not just set it and forget it all the time.
Yeah. And that was one of the big things in where it can be very scary is AI. And if we think of employees, if AI is an employee that you highly value, an employee may come to you or even us, hey, I've not done this before. I don't know how to do this. Whereas
Yes.
AI will go and make things up. And, the example I use in one of the roundtables at Meg is there was a case down here in Florida where an attorney went and he didn't do the work and Sunday night. So he literally fed it in and filed the brief. Well, the AI went because there wasn't any parameters of what he was asking for, and it made up stuff. And, fortunately for him, I don't know if he's still employed. He wasn't disbarred, it didn't appear. But, whereas you ask an employee to do something, they'll come to you and say, they're not going to make something up. They're going to come and, hey, I don't understand this. Can you help me? And seek that guidance. I mean, we've all been there in our career. Heck, there's things today where I'll reach out to mentors like, I've got this issue. I haven't really done something similar or bounce it off of. Whereas AI will just spit back, to your point, garbage. And if you're not attuned enough to really dig into it, you're not going to know, and it's taking you down the wrong direction.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think AI sort of fits into the whole soft skills that we're talking about, there's experience and gut that goes along with some of these decisions that you can't just let AI make for you.
Final one, and then want to get into some personal questions and learn more about you, Kim, is you and I have been, riding this restaurant marketing roller coaster for a couple of years. We talked about, you had 9/11, you had the 08 meltdown, certainly, COVID and what we're going through now. Mm-hmm. What do you see as the biggest change from when you started impacting marketers versus where we are today?
Oh my gosh, that's a good question. I think you sort of nailed it when you said at the end of the day, we're still in the people business. We're still about hospitality. And so throughout all the changes, the ones who survive are the ones who have a good product and who do it well and serve it well. And those are the ones that stand the test of time. You have to have a strong North Star for your brand so that you can always keep that in mind, but yet still be flexible enough to make the change. And so I think those are the ones who will, stand the test of time is, evolving, but staying true to who you are. That's really the key to me. It's kind of oversimplified, but totally true.
Absolutely.
That's a Gene Lee thing, I will tell you. He was always really, really good at understanding at the end of the day, operations has got to be able to execute. And you got to keep it simple.
Yeah, no, as you say it, and like I said, I was fortunate, privileged to, spend, 4 years, just about 4 years working, directly with him on the international side. We, would have our meetings with him. And it was one that it was so funny because people would always ask me, Darden was just like this. And, when Darden bought Rare Hospitality, they got some really good brands, but they got
really
some incredible people. That's really the value they got because, most of the executives ended up coming from Rare Hospitality and that culture. But people would always ask me, because you listen to the earning reports and it was that simple message and literally like, okay, he just doesn't want to give away the secrets. I'm like, no, literally he has ingrained that through the organization, whether it's marketing, don't get too complex. And he's dead on. At the end of the day, take away everything we do, marketing, the apps, going viral. If it's a crap experience that can't be executed, no matter what we do, comp it, give free, get the, biggest stars talking about it. If it's a crap experience, they're not going to come back again and, pay for it. And, you're right. And it was great to be able to get that ingrained and change my thinking of being too complex and making things difficult for our
that's really the secret sauce, I think, with the whole Chili's thing is, actually getting back, talking to the people, asking why are we doing, like sometimes things evolve and you don't even really know why we're doing it that way. You can't remember what changed. And I always call it like, is it death by 1,000 cuts? And you might not think that this one thing will make a big difference, but when you add this one little thing up, it becomes a big thing. And really making sure that the culture, the the hospitality strategy is always kept first and foremost in mind, because you can have great marketing, but if they can't execute it, you don't have shit. So
Absolutely. So let's get into personal questions on you, Kim. First and foremost, if you could go back and give yourself advice as you started this journey, what would it be?
I like I said, I was the corporate ladder climber, and I was always worried about being the best, doing the best, having the most career recognition. And now I'm at the point in my career where I wish I would have said, I mean, everything happens for a reason, but I wish I would have been a little more, not as stringent in sort of my hard and fast rules, and this has got to be the way, and really being more adaptable and taking a little time to smell the roses. Luckily I'm there now. I love doing what I do because I get to do some of the things I'm passionate about, and I think it's made me more well-rounded as a person and as a marketer too. So I think I would have relaxed a little bit when I was younger.
When you were in elementary school, what did you want to do when you grew up?
Oh my gosh. I think everybody goes through, I wanted to be a veterinarian. I loved animals and I thought that would be great. When I was in high school, I thought I would be a lawyer. But lawyers, and marketing people are very similar, to be honest, when you take those personality tests. I think I would have been a good lawyer, but I wanted that creativity, and now lawyers are not even really in the courtroom anyway, so I would have missed all that stuff. But I went to school for marketing. I studied marketing, PR, communication, probably one of those few people who actually use what my degree is in. And, whether it was in restaurant or another industry, I think marketing, advertising probably would have been where I ended up anyway.
Back when we were little, you didn't have work ages, so we maybe junior high or high school started. What was your first job?
So my first job, I was 14, and I worked at a little ice cream store in New Lenox, Illinois, south suburbs of Chicago, at Ranch Frosties, which is still around today. And I loved it because I made $2.85 an hour, and we ate a lot of ice cream. We would have mistakes that we would sell, for less price, and lots of mistakes made it into the cooler and to our friends and to us, I have to say.
You're second person who started with ice cream. I had Jane McPherson on a couple weeks ago, and she outside of St. Louis was ice cream. So that one pops into mind.
Oh, Ted Drew's, where Ted Drew's is famous in St. Louis.
Yeah, she was not that. I knew Ted. She was not that one. And to be honest, as I get older in age, my memory gets worse and worse. Certain things, but I remember she was absolutely ice cream. And I apologize, Jane. I don't remember which ice cream location it was, but I know it wasn't Ted's.
Okay. I lived very close when I lived in St. Louis for a couple of years, and I lived right next to the flagship Ted Drew store. Like I could walk, which was a bad thing.
I was going to say that can't be good when it's convenience can be good and also can be bad when it comes to that.
Mm-hmm.
What's your favorite activity when not working?
Well, I mean, I do a lot of travel. I've been to all 50 states. Most of my domestic travel was work related, just traveling to all the restaurants, etc. And then now I've been to 52 countries and still working on seeing as much of the world as I possibly can while I can. So I always say, travel, I'm a foodie, fashion, stuff like that. One thing that might be a secret that not a lot of people know about me is that I actually am sort of a quasi-influencer on TikTok. I have 55,000 followers, and I do travel, food reviews, stuff like that. Started out being kind of fun, but now, there's some perks related to that too. And I enjoy it.
Wow,
I'm Chicago. My handle is Chicago Girl Southern World.
Chicago. So how did that one come about? Chicago Girls Southern.
world, because I'm from Chicago, born and raised in Chicago, lived there most of my life. But, now I've been in Atlanta. I moved from Chicago to St. Louis to Nashville to Atlanta. I thought I would end up in Miami or something. I kept moving south. But now I've actually lived in the South longer than I lived in Chicago for the first time. And so that's just kind of how it happened. And that's what it is.
Okay, well, I love this. So I'm from Chicago as well. So let's narrow it down. What part of Chicago did you grow up in?
South suburbs, Orland Park is where
Okay, I was in Northwest up in Arlington Heights. So
okay, yeah.
Yeah, so and
I love
fortunate.
Chicago. I really love Chicago.
So was just there, although I was there for a week, very long between Meg and NRA.
Yes.
So, but living in Orlando, we've got Portillo's down here. So all I need is, our friends at either Gino's East or Lou Malnati's. I know you can order them over the, via the web, but just need one of them to come down here. And I think I'll, be set, because those are the two things that I miss most.
They're building the very first Portillo's in Georgia, about 15 minutes from my house in Kennesaw. And I am very excited about that. And pizza as well. I think it's coming. There's a couple Chicago style pizzas here, but it's not the same. It's the water. I'm convinced it's the water.
I'm telling you, and I had this discussion because my Monday night had to do my Gino's East, and it was, one of those like Gino's or Lou's, either one. It's, from convenience. And we were talking, I'm like, okay, I think certain parts of America are ready for a pizza that takes an hour to cook. And that's where I think the biggest thing is, and there's Uno's, there's Giordano's that, have done the chain. But I just think most people, when they sit down to order a meal, are not prepared. Okay, that's going to take 45 to 50 minutes for it to be done. So they've adjusted the recipes. And, I would say it's the water, and I need to probably at the next conference when our friends from Lou Malnati's are there, at RLC, we ordered Lou Malnati's, and it was the same. I don't know if they're transporting water from Chicago to Arizona or not.
Probably not, but I don't know. They had a Gino's East here that opened and then failed in the city. It was not as good. And then what's the other South Side one that's the flat pizza? I cannot think of it.
Connie's?
No. Oh my gosh, it's escaping me in my age. But they did. They opened one here and it closed, and I was so upset.
Yeah. So hopefully we'll have one of those coming down here, and then, like I said, I'll be set. Final question for you, Kim. What's something, you're most proud of in your professional career?
Gosh, what is something? I feel like I'm proud. Now, maybe I didn't anticipate it, but to have such like a long career in this business and have what I feel is a good reputation, mentoring people, working with great mentors, learning every day. It's been a very worthwhile career. And I think, anytime that you're growing a brand, building a brand, and building a team, that's probably been the most rewarding. But now for me, I just want to help. I have two rules on people I'll work with. And I say to myself, I will only work where I will eat the food. I am not working where I'm like, oh God, love the brand, hate the food, It's all about the food, and I will not work with assholes. So I work with really good people. I'm fortunate enough to be able to kind of choose the people I want to work with. And I'm real happy with that. Those two things at the end of the day, good people, good food, have served me well kind of in this third stage in my career. And, I'm super happy about that.
Great. Well, Kim, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this episode.
Okay.
But thank you so much for joining. I've just loved and enjoyed the conversation.
Me too. Anytime.
Okay. And thank you to everyone for joining us. And here's to celebrating the industry we love and serve. Until next time, stay hungry for success.